Good morning, world. This is Steve Rao, the host of Pod and Roku TV's World Edition. We greet you live from anywhere around the world or the United States of America for this live show on our network. I greet you from North Carolina, the eighth largest state in the Union, in Morrisville, which is in the Research Triangle Park, not close from Duke, not too far from Duke or Chapel Hill or NC State. Now, with that being said, today we must begin the show by saying that the United States of America and the world has lost a legendary figure of history and leader in the world, Henry Kissinger, former Secretary of State, National Security Advisor, served President Nixon and President Gerald Ford. Kissinger was known for what he was called shuttle diplomacy, the detente with China, relationships with China during the Nixon administration, stabilizing the Middle East after the Yom Kippur War, becoming the voice of reason for many issues in the foreign policy of the United States of America, and was in preempt authority for nations around the world as he advised presidents of the United States. Much of the history of Henry Kissinger will be remembered for pulling out of Vietnam, overseeing those efforts. And there were some controversies. For example, him supporting Pakistan in the 1970s when they had been conducting massacres in Bangladesh. But there's no such thing as a perfect diplomat. But Kissinger almost became a verb. I mean, he was such a leader in the free world and was looked upon by many in the world as an authority, an immigrant from Germany, a heavy, profound German accent, but obviously a Harvard graduate, an Ivy League educated man whose wisdom and guidance made the world a better place during the Cold War and during tense relationships between China and the United States. I often wonder what Henry Kissinger would say to what's going on in the world today. And maybe we'll talk about that. But I will recommend a book that he wrote with Eric Schmidt, which I just finished, called The Future of AI. And it's very fascinating to hear from Kissinger on artificial intelligence and its impact on the world. So we're going to begin the show today talking about that. Some other news to cover in the world is that Elon Musk says Twitter is going to lose a lot of his advertisers, he's afraid, or X, so to speak, no longer Twitter. We're in the seventh day of the truce with the Hamas-Israel war. We're going to talk about that. And as we get ready for December in the United States, we're getting into the holiday frenzy. I think they're going to be cutting the Christmas tree, turning the lights on the holiday tree here soon this evening. Already happened in Rockefeller Plaza. And the world is getting ready for the end of 2023 and the beginning of 2024, which will be a historic presidential election. So I know I probably forgot some issues, but we're going to go ahead and get started. I'm here for about 30 minutes today. Mark Lee, go ahead and join me here today, and we're going to go ahead and get started. But we're going to focus some of the show on Kissinger today. And of course, all eyes are on Jimmy Carter. There are many people saying that they believe his passing will happen very soon now that he's lost his wife. Sometimes God works in mysterious ways, but, President has lost Rosalind Carter. Will he continue to fight on, or will this be a setback for him psychologically? We'll see. But anyway, Mark, welcome to the show. And, Kissinger, right? I mean, where do you begin? I mean, the guy was such a preeminent leader in foreign policy for many years, was just cited for talking about the Cold War, China, the falling of the Berlin Wall, the collapse of the Soviet Union, the rise of a new China, which is now an adversary of the United States. And I didn't have time to research it, but I'm going on the radio tomorrow. But there was a lot of things Kissinger was saying about the current world order. And I do believe one of the things he said was that he really believed that the changing world was the powers of North Korea, China, Russia against the United States and other allies. And are we headed towards what we call a new development of Axis powers that, could really affect the future of world peace and stability. But anyway, just wanted to open up with Kissinger's death. We'll probably, maybe some of our panelists will have some thoughts. But I think it's important to talk about this. And memories of Henry Kissinger. Of course, you and I are relatively young. We were just kids when he was in the West Wing or in the Oval Office, but we remember his voice.
Definitely remember his voice. Definitely remember his conversations around a number of issues. I definitely even remember, I believe, a couple of times him being referred by one of my college professors, because as I've said on this show before, one of my college professors was George Reedy, who was the press secretary under LBJ, and who definitely had some ties to some of those same folks that knew Kissinger as well, and all along those spaces. And I was trying to remember some of the stances, and that's actually what I was looking up, that Kissinger took around another very important issue that was very much in the news, and I could not remember, and maybe some of our readers can refresh my memory, what his views were as many of the African nations were fighting for independence under his time in office. And of course, there was the whole conversation around apartheid during that time as well. So I was trying to remember some of the things that were said by Kissinger and some of his thoughts on that particular issue and everything. And maybe, like I said, some of our listeners may have some thoughts or some ideas of what he said or what his thoughts were in that space. And I'm still looking up some of those details. But if anybody knows and wants to reflect on that, I would gladly hear from them. And they can even use our platform and write their reflections in on Facebook or a number of other sources as well. But as you said, that's just some of the things I was trying to remember. And I do remember some of those things that were part of the conversation that you talked about, like the relationships with China and relationships with the Middle East.
I didn't have time. I mean, I'm going to try to have a newsletter maybe dedicated to them for my city office. But the Economist announcement, they didn't really talk much about China. So I must admit, I got a lot of criticism early on the day getting my my bullet points from the New York Times. So I get the Economist briefings, and I tell you, it's wonderful. You can get pretty much every day. I get the email for one, but in the Economist, they didn't really talk much about China, but much of China. Nick, you're older than Mark and me, or should I say wiser? Kissinger played a big role in the what they call detente, right, between China and U.S.
Yes. Yeah, he did. And even though I didn't know Henry Kissinger, I do have a relate. I did know that a lot of people don't know, he passed away quite some time ago, William Saxby. Now, William Saxby and Kissinger were basically the same age. William Saxby was my second cousin, and once removed, he became the Attorney General of the United States. And so and he knew my family pretty well, so he kept saying, well, your son should be an attorney, so just like me, right? So I became an attorney just like Will Saxby, except he became Attorney General of the United States, and I'm on Pod TV. So obviously there's a little difference here. But William Saxby was also the ambassador to India. A lot of people don't know that, Steve. So my second cousin was actually an ambassador to India for quite some time, where he spent quite a bit of time with Henry Kissinger, who at that point in time was Secretary of State. They were both served under Nixon and Ford. Okay, they survived the Saturday Night Massacre when Nixon fired everybody, and then he resigned. And Kissinger, though, he just lived a long time. I mean, died at age 100, and Jimmy Carter is 99 right now. So the longevity that takes place in the country allows for this long history that we're seeing right now in terms of political leaders and, frankly, a lot of people around the world. So yes, an era has passed when he passed. A lot of people my age do remember him, and of course the diplomacy with China and his ping pong diplomacy. They also had that going on, and eventually we created a lot of trade with China. And I think between him and Nixon, when they opened up the doors with China, man, they opened up. They made the China great again. I mean, there's just no question about it. They become the manufacturing center of the world, and their GDP is second only to the United States, and will probably surpass the United States at the end of this decade. So we've seen a lot of geopolitical changes in the world. One of it is the United States will no longer be the largest producing economy in the world. They're going to cede that to China probably by the end of this decade. And the other thing is that we got to be aware of, and I'll throw this back out, It's 34 trillion in national debt that we've accumulated. One commentator said, well, it's a lot of debt we owe ourselves, which is true. There's only like 7 or 8 trillion that other countries have bought. But at the same time, it puts a stranglehold on future congressmen like yourself, Steve, when you go to the Tilly and you find out, okay, you want to do something with the money, and you found out that the credit card has already been spent years ago. So I do think that you're going to see more of a focus in on high level government spending, a lot of programs that, frankly, the U.S. government should not be involved in. And I think you're going to see a trend with that. With that, I know we're doing world politics.
We're doing world politics. Before we get to world politics, just
Yeah,
really
go on.
quickly, I was going to say, because I did find one of the articles, and we can talk about definitely the positive side, but apparently even in the apartheid conversation, there was some of that shuttle diplomacy that you were talking about, because apparently he had one of those speeches that he was given, or those conversations he was given in Lusaka, Zambia, where he was putting pressure on the white ruled Rhodesia to accept a majority rule, and more gently, Kissinger asked South Africa to announce a timetable to achieve self-determination in Namibia. And he then traveled to Tanzania to make a similar address, and a series of high-profile meetings followed with apartheid's then Prime Minister John Vorster. Those took place in Germany and Switzerland. The records of those encounters make interesting reading. Over dinner on June 23rd, 1976, the ice was broken over a racist joke, which established a kind of camaraderie between a dozen gentlemen that were deliberating on the future of a subcontinent for 2 hours. And eventually there was definitely some conversation going on in the sense of some of these things in place, and along those lines. And one other negative thing that we forgot to mention, because like I said, you have to look at both the positive and the negative as we are reflecting on folks. And apparently, and I was not aware of this until I was looking this up, Nick, and as Steve just said, you are a little bit older. I think Lee might be even a little bit older as well, or maybe in the same age range. And I see that he's in the background. But apparently there was a time that he was actually encouraging a coup, as we think about like in Latin America, and apparently he encouraged a coup in Chile. And there's been some people that point that out as one of the things that they didn't like about him when they talk about some of the negative aspects of his statements, like abilities and in that space. So like I said, that's just one of the examples as I recall, and I'll bring him up and everything all in those lines, even though he has passed, and I'm sure he'll have some positive news to say about him in the sense of some of the things that he did. But if I remember correctly, and correct me if I'm wrong, because as I've told many people on this show before, I don't like to put people's words in people's mouths, but I think I've heard you say a couple of times that you were not the biggest fan of Mr. Kissinger for some of the things that he had done in Eastern Europe and all along those lines. But if I misheard you, please correct me, and all in that space. But I do think I've heard you say a couple of times that there were things that you were not favorable of in his stances around Eastern Europe.
It might have been me, but I say a lot of things, Mark. But then again,
I'll be curious.
Sasha may have said that. There we go. We'll go blame Sasha.
Sasha, what is your thoughts around Mr. Kissinger? And am I correct in saying that there were some diplomatic decisions that he made that you were not favorable of, for lack of a better term?
That's an easy question. I'll tell you why.
Yes.
First of all, if it wouldn't be for Kissinger, the Soviet Union would cease to exist at least 20 years earlier than it did, because Kissinger was practicing the idea of detente policy, and he was trying to accommodate the Soviet Union as much as possible. And of course, that was against interests of the United States. Second of all, he being a Jew and the son of a Jewish immigrant from Germany, and he did some absolutely outrageous things about when it was a question of immigration of Soviet Jews from Soviet Union. He said something to the effect that even if all of them would be gassed, that's not United States problem, or perhaps humanitarian problem, but not problem of United States. So this person was being Jew himself. He was not against Soviet Jews being gassed. And he was saying that it's not a problem in the United States. What a man, what a creature. How you can seriously speak about him when he was doing and saying outrageous things, absolutely. And even when there was a Yom Kippur War in 73, and Israel was already taking over Syria and Egypt, it was already entering Damascus. And Kissinger was traveling back and forth or so on and trying to dissuade Golda Meir and asking her to stop the attack or so on. Who knows if Israel would destroy Syria and Egypt at that time? That would be the last war for many years. And okay, so he was able to stop further advance of Israel. Again, was it in interest of United States? Hardly, because when you left them, they could regroup, prepare new attacks, and as a matter of fact, the history repeats now. Remember when these atrocities happened on October 7th, United States was 100% behind Israel. It helped Israel any way it could and send this avia carriers and so many other things. But situation changed now. How did it change? It changed that with social media, which is replaced what was a journalism, say 50 years ago, when educated, well-informed, professional journalists were able to recreate the picture of what's really happening and explain to their readers what is here and what is what. Now, any uneducated, stupid idiot can publish and repost anything on social media. And because most of the, let's face it, okay, come on, I am not going to be politically correct, but majority of population on earth are morons, uneducated idiots who have nothing else to do but punch their keys on their computers and iPhones or so on and post and repost. And most of people are actually reposting. They don't have even enough brains to create their own post and share their own opinion. Nobody does it. Maybe 1 out of 199 people out of 100, they are just keep repost. Okay, if you punch this button and then that button, okay, you repost it and you send it to some 25 of your followers, and then those 25 will share another 25 of each followers or so on, and it's multiplying. So what's happened now is that what Biden discovered is that because of that effect of the social media effect, Biden now realized, it took him a while, but he realized that he's losing election because of that issue, because of that all event. And it will cost me $500 to tell you the truth, because although it's not true, because I'm losing $500 if he will lose to Trump. If he will lose to somebody else, that changes the story for me.
Well, I mean, it's just amazing. I mean, Sasha, you really highlighted some really wonderful points. I mean, I think that it's important to know that not every decision that he made was perfect, right? And meanwhile, Kissinger, I mean,
Kissinger. Yeah, Kissinger. Just really quickly.
In my book, he's a dangerous man, but no longer because he
just passed away and everything.
Well, one thing I forgot to mention real quickly, and we're going to end with my monologue today is going to end about honoring a certain special person who's celebrating their first birthday today. And I'm going to have you guess who that is, but we're going to talk about that at the end of the show. But really quickly, the United States of America has alleged that they did not succeed in foiling an attempt for an Indian national hiring a hitman to kill somebody that was arguing for a Sikh separatist government. So this is going to be interesting. And we remember the assassination in Canada. Now this is being, so that's going to be interesting to see what's going on with the U.S.-India relationship behind the scenes, and why we're not hearing from folks about this as much. But maybe we'll bring in Mr. Chapman.
Just
By the
really
way, this
quickly.
was on NPR.
Yeah,
the
just
other
really
day,
quickly, and there have been some people
and it's just
talking
not
about that.
India that's doing it. Turkey is doing it currently. In other words, Turkey is involved in, like, if you said something against Erdogan's rule and you're in Turkey, they'll assassinate you. If you're outside of Turkey, they'll assassinate you. So it's not just limited to India, who's doing international assassination. Saudi Arabia apparently was involved in it, Turkey, and of course our great United States of America.
Hey, Nick, this has been going on for a while, as I've told both you and Sasha, and I cannot think of the gentleman's name right now and everything. Felix, I believe it is, or maybe it was Peter, but it was one of those names and all along those lines. But he was a part of the Russian spy network and all along those lines, or some of that conversation that was going on around double agency and all in that space, was convicted and all along those lines. And like I've told both of you, that gentleman was working with me when we were working together and not doing it online there at the test and assessment company. So he went from dealing with prison terms to actually grading test papers and everything. And you can actually, and if I think of the name again, I'll remember it and refresh myself and other people's memories, but you can look it up in Wikipedia. He was part of a very famous case and all along those lines. I believe it was Felix Bloch, if I remember correctly, if that name sounds familiar to you, Sasha, and all along those lines. But definitely, he was definitely part of that whole Russian spy network. And like I said, I looked around and I found out he was working with me because, hey, do you serve your time or deal with your issues, you have to go work someplace or another. I did have some bad news. One, I was getting ready to mention something Lee said. Lee said that Henry Kissinger had, there was an article in Politico that talked about Henry Kissinger and Germany, and I think you alluded to this, Sasha, letting in way too many foreigners, and apparently Kissinger recently said it was a grave mistake for Germany to take in so many migrants amid the pro-Hamas protests and all along those lines. So definitely that'll be interesting to see what's going on in that space and all along those lines. And I did have some bad news for you, Nick, and all along those lines, because I know you were touting the notion and wanting a certain person to run for president and all along those lines, and reached by CNBC on yesterday. He has said he has no plans to run for president in 2024. So despite your trying to get him to do it and everything, and then despite his selling his majority stake in the Mavericks and getting out of Shark Tank and a number of other things, he is said that even though he considered that run in 2020 and even went so far as to hire a pollster to gauge his favorability, and he would have run as an independent, but ultimately back then he decided against it due to his long shot odds and the stress it would have caused his family. And maybe those same conversations were taken this time around. So definitely looks like
I think basically if he ran as president, he'd be handing it to Donald Trump or whoever the Republican is. So,
Actually, I'm doing a poll right now, and he's leading Donald Trump about 60 to 40. So on the Pod TV poll. So right now, if he was to run, the next president of the United States would be Mark Cuban, at least according to LinkedIn and Pod TV.
Well, like I said, apparently it's a moot point because he said, I don't want to make
that decision. Hey, he still has some time. So, it's not over till it's over, as they say. He does a lot of sports. He knows that things come down to the last minute. So, Mark, there's still a chance we can save the United States of America, and we have a man who could actually do it, as opposed to what we have right now. So there is a chance, So here's the nominee for president of the United States. Please go get him. It's like in sports, you go look for your best player. You put him on the team, baby. You don't pick from the bottom of the rack. And your best player may be in the transfer portal. Here's your best player. He's in the transfer portal. Bring him in, baby. Bring him in. So
well, it's amazing, and I think that we'll see what happens, right? I mean, I still think it's a Trump-Biden race, but you just never know whether. Well, you don't know what's going to happen, right? And whether other parties are going to emerge in there. Um,
Yeah.
I don't understand. I mean,
Speaking of amazing, Steve, I got a question for you since I know you said you only had 30 minutes and all along those lines.
well, I'm
But
going to
I
steal
did see
one.
that there was a major individual. I forgot which one it was. I don't think it was Tillis, but it was one of those leaders of the Republican Party here in North Carolina, the one that you say is the 8th largest state in the union and all in that space. But he has thrown his support behind Mark Roberts, who is the African American gentleman running for.
Who is that? Who is that?
That
It was
Berger,
one of these
something like
Berger.
that.
Thank you. It was Berger that
Some North Carolina hack.
Yeah,
I
Berger has
mean,
thrown his
Mark
support
Robinson.
behind Mark Roberts.
Yeah, I mean, come on.
Phil Berger?
Yes.
Yeah, Phil Berger. Do you know him?
Well, that's no surprise. I mean, this is Phil Berger is the architect of
North
the new
Carolina.
maps and all of those things, and
Yeah.
it's crazy.
I really would like to see non-politicians get involved, Steve, except for you. You actually should be moving up the ranks and be more involved and get rid of these other clowns that you associate.
Well, no, I am, folks. I mean, I did want. Well, what I'm doing, I've decided is I will be most likely running for Wake County Commissioner in 26, which will put me representing 1 million people in the state's largest county.
Right.
And if I can make that happen, then it's going to open the door in 28 for my intent to serve in the nation's capital. So I've got to take one more step, but I decided to play it safe. I'm doing a great job in Morrisville, and of course, my new bet. There's only two things I love more than my role in the media: my wife and family, and tennis, and now pickleball. And so I have a love affair now with the mic and the TV and the camera. And
Right.
I didn't want to run for the Council of State this year because I would have to give all of it up, from PBS to WPTF. You can't do any of that. And I said, you know what? I like it too much. So, but I'm going to keep building brand, and hopefully that'll help me. And maybe one day I'll do this.
The Raleigh-Durham, North Carolina area, a lot of people don't know the area that we live in is actually bigger than the country of Estonia. And we're bigger than the country of Luxembourg and Moldova, like combined.
Liechtenstein, Andorra, there are several countries.
The Raleigh-Durham metro area is actually bigger
we're
than
big.
a lot of
About
countries.
9 million in our state, right?
But
A couple.
something like that. But speaking of brands, and before we get back to international issues and world issues and everything, the other thing that folks may be fascinated by that I had seen was there are folks that are trying to get, and we've talked about them before, the PACs, the political action committees, and they're trying to get the endorsement of certain key ones. I think that I was invited recently to go to a meeting of the People's Alliance. I think that's in December. And there's another one that is the one that focuses on the interest of the African American community here in Durham, North Carolina. And I did see that both the gentleman that is running against Josh Stein, because yes, there is a gentleman that is running against him, Mike Morgan, as well as Josh Stein, are actively campaigning to get those endorsements and everything. So I know that you know Josh Stein, and Josh Stein would be the front runner, but Mike Morgan is a former judge, and he might have some support as well. So, Steve, I just wanted your thoughts around Mike Morgan's campaign.
Well, for those listening, let me explain to you kind of the dilemma that we're in, and of course, I'd like Toby and Nick to come in here. So really, what we have in North Carolina is we have a Harvard-educated, Dartmouth undergraduate. He was only 2 years behind President Obama in law school, who was a state senator and now the Attorney General of North Carolina, running to be governor of North Carolina. He is the first nominee of the Democratic Party to be the Jewish faith and would be the first Jewish governor elected in North Carolina history. He's been endorsed by Roy Cooper, who's one of his best friends, and the governor of North Carolina, who's very popular, has endorsed him. He's running against Mark Robinson, who gave a speech at City Council in Greensboro, has basically said in public that LGBT are filth. He has said publicly, and if none of you believe me, I can send you the citations. He said that God sent David to fight Goliath, not Davida, that a woman's place is in the home, and that if elected governor, he would make abortion illegal in all cases. He's raised more money than any Republican governor in history, and this is going to be a $60 million race. But now Mike Morgan enters the picture, who is a Supreme Court justice, a black man, an American, black American, very smart guy. And the question is, would he be better positioned to run against Mark Rubin as a black man? Mark, I don't know what you're hearing. I heard he doesn't have a chance in the primary, but we could be mistaken. We never know, right? What are you hearing out there?
I'm actually hearing that depending on who he gets to help him in the campaign, and there are definitely some folks that are not the biggest Josh Stein fans, that he might have a greater chance than you are giving him credit for. And all along those lines, it is a statewide race, and he would have to build some momentum in some different areas like the Appalachian area and all along those lines, and of course down there by the coast and a number of other places. And there may be some skeletons and some other things that are in Josh Stein's past as well, because if you run as a attorney general, just as you run as a judge, there are things that you do that can come back to haunt you in the middle of a race and all in that space. So it could be interesting to see how it plays out. Political races can get nasty sometimes, and right now, yes, Josh Stein is the front runner and all in that space, and as you said, probably the major front runner. But I never, as Nick just said, count anybody out, and there is new folks that are joining the race, and it's not just Mike Morgan that is one of them, but there are some others that have joined the race as well, and it's not over, to use that old singing analogy, till the fat lady sings, and all in that space. So, Jadobi, I don't know what you heard, because you've got some friends in the political realm as well. So, any thoughts? And does Mike Morgan stand a chance against Josh Stein? Because I do know that you have some friends that are in the political realm, just like I do as well. So, does Mike Morgan,
what are your thoughts here?
What's your thoughts?
I mean,
Mike
I think
Morgan
Morgan has a shot. It all boils down to the marketing, and that's what we are in our political realm, is that it's all about marketing and name recognition. If Morgan can get out there and push his name and actually get some traction behind his name, of course he has a chance. He has to have that moment. But I think right now something is. What's up?
Yeah. Sorry. No, Jadobi, I didn't mean to interrupt. I think the challenge is the money, right? I mean, Stein is just so ahead in fundraising, and I think a lot of that turns out is, but in certain primaries, you don't need the money. I mean, when Yvonne Hawley ran for lieutenant governor against Senator Van Dyne had a $700,000 raise, and Hawley beat her and had like $50,000 or $100,000 and won, because a black woman had a better chance in the primary. So in this case, I guess Morgan's chances, what if more blacks come out to vote him than we think? And, although, you got to like Stein's chances against white voters. So, I mean, I got to tell you, Mike Morgan is a very personable guy too. I mean, I've known him for years. He knows, and I've been supporting Stein because, most of the institutional Democrats are supporting him, and I didn't know Morgan was getting in until last minute. I mean, he should have probably gotten in, sooner. But I'll end with this, and we're going to go back to national issues, and global issues. But the bottom line is that if Mark Robinson wins, North Carolina is going to be a very, very different state. I mean, some of the things this guy has said, I don't care whether you're a Republican, right? But what I care is when you say things that are hateful. And I would say the same thing as a Democrat. If you're a governor, you have to govern. You have to lead the people of the state. And I don't know whether he's playing politics, because that's what's obviously he's playing to the base, and he's raising a lot of money. But maybe it's just the way the game is played. I don't know, but it's scary to hear him talk.
Steve, speaking of playing to the base and everything, and we've had this issue come up a couple of times on World Politics and World Edition, and I'm glad at least hearing maybe he's got some comments, because a lot of times we attack those that are single mothers as being a choice, and some of the things that they do and all in that space, and them not getting enough of a support from our society and a number of other things. I actually had a very interesting conversation. I'd love to hear Lee's thoughts around this, and even Nick and others that have brought up this notion of choice and what the difference of single mothers and the two-family idea, because a lot of people are very much supportive of people having both a mom and a dad, and I'm not arguing that, but I actually had in some ways I am. I had a very interesting conversation with a young lady yesterday and everything, and she has got a father that unfortunately got caught up in the crack epidemic that we know took place in the 70s and the 80s and all along those lines. So her dad, when she was a youngster, would leave her at home, and all along those lines, she had a very disaffectionate mother, a mother that wasn't definitely in her life and wasn't emotionally attached to her, because she was even talking about how she tried to play games with her mother, and that did not oftentimes work because the mother was just naturally disaffectionate. And there are people that are disaffectionate and all in that space. So in that case, I would think, Jatovy, that would be a case of a two-home family that is just as dysfunctional as some single families can be. And like I said, I was just giving part of the narrative that they gave me. There was other parts of the narrative as well, including being left literally at crack homes and all in, or crack spaces and all along those lines. But I would think that would be an example of a two-home family that isn't necessarily going to be all that great. And I can just as easily turn around and give you a single family, or a family that was singly run, that was the more traditional kind of ideal family, even though it was only one mother or one father and everything along those lines. But I just wanted your thoughts, Jatovy, and even Steve and Sasha, because sometimes we hear on this network a lot of people that are pushing the idea of the ideal two parents in the household. And while that might be ideal, we do know that there are examples where there can be two parents, and there's a lot of dysfunction among those two parents. But I'd love to hear y'all's thoughts, and I just use that as an example.
Oh, I mean, yes, it is. I mean, it's been proven. Yes, two-parent homes have greater success with children, or raising children and successes in the home, than a one-parent home. But again, it's not a lot of times it's not a choice that happens. It's just that that's what the parent has to deal with. And they did a study in, I was trying to find out the date of the study. I think it was actually earlier this year. They've done studies that found out that in that two-parent home, or even in the one-parent, be it the same sex parents, that doesn't matter. There's no true differential in success rate. So a two dads raising a child would have basically the same, if not similar, success as a mom and a father. Two moms raising a child would have the same, if not the similar successes as raising a child as a mother and a father. It's just, again, a lot of times, and I always push back when we say it's a choice, and I'll always do that, because we don't know the circumstances that put those individuals in that position. Right. Because when we say it's a choice, we tend to blame women for a lot of things. How even in this conversation, we're not even talking about single parent father homes. We're talking about single parent mother homes being a choice. No, we don't know the circumstances.
Jatovy, just along those same lines, even the choice of this particular person, and as y'all know, I'm a listener and love hearing my friends and acquaintances sharing their stories and all of that. But even that choice was a choice that was made, but was a choice that impacted them for life, because the way that this particular individual told me about their person that was part of their family that was addicted to crack and all along those lines was that they went to a party one day and was given a drug, and that drug, they did not know the impact of it, but they loved the kind of joy that it gave them, and they kept chasing that high forever and a day until they think they're still around and everything, but then have eventually gotten clean and all in that space. But they spent a number of years chasing that high because of going to a party one day and getting the somebody to hand them that drug and all in that space.
And that's where I begin. And like I said, that's why I push back, because we don't know the context that put them there. And and also, we as a society tend to use choice to alienate others and say that we are, or place ourselves on pedestals. For example, oh, well, it was a choice that they took this. Right. Well, if they're addicted, it's no longer a choice for them. It's something that their body is needing, and they are fighting tooth and nail to avoid, but their body, it's no longer a choice. Sometimes we have to, a lot of times we tie, and that's why, again, I don't like you using the word choice in these conversations, because it has such a negative connotation, and it allows us to disassociate our ideals and place ourselves on a pedestal. And then we begin to get in that argument. Hey, if I can look outside and it's a choice that that they did and I didn't. I succeeded, but they could. It shouldn't be that way. The context matters, and we cannot overlook the fact that okay, they're in this predicament. How do we work with them? How do we empathize, and how do we get past this idea of separating ourselves and placing ourselves on a pedestal to say, hey, you can do better because I did. Well, I don't have this. We don't live the same lives. We don't walk in the same.
Yeah, Jutopia, and I hear what you're saying, and I definitely from Steve, and maybe Sasha wants to jump in. Of course, we can get to the other world issues as well. But Steve, from my understanding, and I've met you a couple of times. I don't think I've met the kids yet. I have met Jutovi's kids in person and everything, and definitely have not met Sasha's. He's all the way there in Canada. But we do know that there are, and I kind of alluded to it earlier, there are some parents that aren't necessarily the best parents and all in that world. I just mentioned that one of the other parents was dysfunctional and all in that space, because not everybody that has a baby is prepared for a baby, and sometimes they are not going to be as affectionate as we would like and all in that space. So people have different parenting styles, and sometimes those parenting styles can impact the kids as well. So like I said, Steve, when I have observed your conversation around your kids, you seem very attached to them and very supportive. But I'm sure that even in your own community, you know some parents that are not very close or clingy or even attached to their kids and all in that space. So just wanted your thoughts around this, because there are some parents that are not as attached as we would like in the stereotype Brady Bunch way to their kids.
Well, I mean, I think I can't speak on behalf of the Asian or Indian community, but I can say for almost all Indian Americans that I've known most of my life, they're very, very focused on the family unit and children. The extended family, not so much as it used to be. In India, you have now high rates of divorce. More women are working. Many of the traditional problems in marriage that we've seen in Western societies now occur. But most focus is on kids. Most focus is on education, intense focus on education. And, but I think all of us are attached to the children, and, maybe some people aren't so much. I spent more time, alone as a kid, as a tennis player, traveling a lot, left home when I was 14. Didn't really, have people there cajoling me along during those formative years. So even though I'm very extroverted and have a lot of friends, I really am much of a loner. Where I've had to learn how to deal with just my own situations and fight on the tennis court for every ball, and now in politics, fighting as hard as I can. And but I've been managed to be very close to my children. So I don't know, Mark. I mean, I think that when it comes to abortion and making these decisions, these are personal choices that people make, and I think the argument is always about, does a woman have a right to choose and make that choice for herself, or does the government have the right to choose? And I think at the end of the day, I believe that a woman should have a right to choose. But I believe that we also have to look at cases of rape, incest, unfortunate circumstances, and I realize it's a sensitive issue. I'm not saying that by any stretch of the imagination. I'm 52, so don't think my wife and I are going to have any more kids. But if she came to me and said she was pregnant again, probably our culture would just assume we're having the baby. So there's something to be said for that, and I think there are people that are against abortion because they really do believe in life and conception, and I think that it's one of those issues that it's just people are either going to be for it, they're going to be against it, and I think Roe v. Wade's decision overturning that just really ripped a Band-Aid off a wound, and it's just, we'll see what happens.
But Steve, along those same lines, there are, because you just mentioned your age, 52. I'm in my early 60s. If I was even to meet a younger woman and we were to have a child, the possibilities of that child, and Jacoby, you can speak to this as your wife is in the neonatal unit, would be greater that child would have a birth defect. And I know that you mentioned one of the things about that not being a choice, but the older you get and having children, the chances of birth defects are greater and all along those lines. So like I said, if a 62, by the time I had the child, I'd be 62, had a child, and particularly with a woman that was of a similar age as I would think, the chances of a birth defect or some sort of other birth anomaly would be tremendously great and had to be guarded against. But like I said, you would know better than I. And I was watching some of the chat back and forth, and you're talking about some of the things that are not necessarily a choice, even though you know the dangers that you're going into if you have children later. So in that sense, it is somewhat of a choice. But if you have the sexual relationship and a child is born, that's what happens. And you have to make those choices, and all in that space. But I'd love to hear your thoughts, because I was watching the things where you're saying that rape, abuse, and even birth defects and cancer are not necessarily choices.
Yeah, I mean it's one of those things is just what Steve said. Again, and this gets into why I say we cannot argue or fight over the quote unquote choice of it, because again, that is something that we don't know the context around. Why is this woman deciding to do her or utilize this medical procedure? We don't know the context. It's not up to us to decide. It's not up to the government to decide.
Yeah, and I think I had a cousin. Well, I know people that have had to decide they want to have children later, and I think that they have to make those decisions knowing full well the risks and asking themselves, are they ready to raise a child with a disability? It takes a special person to raise a child with a disability. I've learned a lot from people that raise special needs children, whether they're autistic, whether they have Down syndrome. These children are special children. And it takes a special person to raise these children. And so, but I think you have to make these decisions. But as Jovi and I have said, I think it comes down to a woman's choice and the family's choice. I don't think it's our right to come in there as the government and say, we don't want to have a kid. You make your choices. And if you have a kid at 60 or 55, the chances are that kid is going to have Down syndrome. They're going to have a disability. And you're going to have to learn to live with that. And it's going to take a lot of resources and emotional commitment and financial commitment. And some families are willing to do that. One of my best friends in college has one son with Down syndrome. Our former mayor of Morrisville had a daughter that my first mayor I served with had Down syndrome. But she's a wonderful young woman. She's working. She's strong. She's posting on Facebook. And my hat goes off to the mayor and her husband for raising that child with absolute dignity and a wonderful job, right? And I don't know whether I would be able to do it.
Well, even Steve, even talking about that, but the thing that I find, I guess, most insulting about trying to take the choice away from women, and the whole idea behind, well, we have to make them carry it till term, unless it's life threatening to the woman. Do you and that whole argument there is just idiotic, because of the fact that pregnancy itself is a threat to the woman's life. You don't go through pregnancy and have no hurdles and so on. So pregnancy is not 100% for women. So if a woman gets pregnant, there is a possibility that she may die. So there is a threat to her life. Therefore, that choice should always be hers, no one else's, because there is potential for death of the woman if she gets pregnant. I mean, it's just a fact of life. But for some odd reason,
Toby, one of our founders mentioned this in their quote and everything, but they brought up the notion that 24 million children a year are abused, starved, homeless, and killed, tortured, because women are being forced to have babies that they don't need or able. I won't say need. That's a kind of word that I don't like to put in that particular context. I'll just say that they aren't able to handle. I'll just leave it at that, and to maybe clean it up a little bit. And the person is asking, why do Republican pro-life supremacists not think that their life matters after birth? And that is one of the conversations, is if you want to bring them into the world, don't you need to take care of them for the 18 years that they are not able to take care of themselves? Now, in some societies, it might be 16, but however long we want to say it is, don't we need to have things in place to take care of them and all in that space? I did see that Lee Newton Rhodes was agreeing that there should be agree with what Kim was saying, but also saying that how do we prevent women from using abortion as a form of birth control? Because that is one of the other conversations.
That is a ridiculous argument. That argument, the one that at the end, what saying that, oh well, women are just using it and flippantly using it as important. That is not the norm. That is not the actual. And regardless if they are, that's their choice. That's their ability. That's their option. They know their history more so than anybody else. Maybe they can't afford particular things, but this is what happened. Maybe they got raped by their uncle, which happens. That is not up to me to decide. That is not up to her neighbor to decide. That is not up to the government to decide. That is up to that woman in that situation and her medical professional and her family. That is them. It has nothing to do with me. That gets back to the point that Kim had brought up, talking about the amount of children that get left. There are a ton of kids that are in adoption. The irony behind the pro-life move, everybody technically is pro-life. We cannot, that is such a misnomer. It's just ridiculous. But the pro-life movement argues that, well, they should just put it up for adoption. Well, adoption centers are packed to the wall and kids aren't being adopted. There are tons of minority kids in adoption centers now that can be adopted, but aren't, and are just left there. And then a lot of them are put there because of the issue that the Republicans do not want to put up the early childhood education stuff. They do not want to have the safety net for children. They want to take away SNAP programs, which feed poor, impoverished women and children, which are the ones who are mostly on these programs. Right. And that's the problem there, is that it comes down to what the other founder keeps bringing up on every show he pops up on, is that saying, well, what about the $1 trillion in debt? Well, there's a big old, everything connects. And if you want to really start cutting things, that's what, if you're just looking at these idealistic, well, it's just a numbers thing, that's a problem. That's why you can't outrun a government like a business, because you start cutting these things, you're cutting on kids that need food, women that need to pay for their kids, early childhood education. And then you talk about the elderly. You keep cutting these things, and now you got kids that can't pay for their parents' medicine. So it's like, it's ridiculous. It's all about this idea that this money thing. And that's why the Republicans don't put that in there.
No, they definitely don't put that in there. Sasha, I don't know if you have any quick thoughts or anything.
Well, I'm going to get ready to do my wrap up. I have to go take my wife. I would get 2 minutes. I'm going to go ahead and do my wrap up for today. If you don't, to close my monologue, if you don't mind, Mark, because I've got to head out.
Do it a minute and a half.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah,
Please go. Keep going. Keep going, guys.
Yeah, go ahead, Sasha, and then we'll have Steve close up.
Sasha, please.
I'm a little bit disappointed with this program, what you spent the last 40 minutes or so. It's not entertaining. It's not educational. You cannot teach anything to anybody. What you're discussing is that the women are forced to have kids, or they have to go through abortion or so on. It's again the same thing, what I'm saying over and over. It's the same thing that to say it's better to be healthy and wealthy than poor and sick. It's obvious things. What don't you understand? You're discussing obvious things that people are, whenever they have a juvenile pregnancy, unwanted pregnancy, it's a tragedy. Anyway, it will be resolved through abortion or through birth, that this person, the little kid, is already disadvantages to all his peers and so on, and most likely it will last his lifetime. So you're already producing a poor baby who has no chance in this life. That's so obvious. Why would you talking about obvious things? Why?
Sasha, hold on a second, but I've got to tease you about something, because you said something yesterday that I found interesting, and I'll get and hear your response to it. But you were talking about how you could not teach people investments and all along those lines, and you didn't feel it was your duty to do it on modern investment. But I would argue that half the shows here are educational, so therefore you are part of an educational network. But you said that your course is not educational. But aren't you giving people investment tips? Wouldn't that be education?
No, what I'm saying is that nobody can do what I do. Even when my people on the show, like Jim, and Milan, they cannot do what I'm doing. They're on a show now for years. And so what? Or remember, Peter used to be on my shows 2 years ago or so on. Can he do anything close to what I'm doing? Absolutely not. So what I came to the conclusion that what I'm doing, it's impossible to replicate. It's a unique. It's something that you have to.
That's
Yes,
okay.
sir.
Well, Sasha,
Just
thank you
really
for
quick,
bringing that up.
Jacoby, and then I want
Let
to hear
me-
your close out. But Jacoby?
Well, no,
Uh,
I think that's
just-
he's given us a good opportunity to go to some other topics. So I want to thank Sasha because I think sometimes we spend too long on one topic. My apologies for that. So I'm going to go ahead and
Well-
start the discussion and have Jacoby chime in. But let's take a break from the abortion issue for now, and let's go to a 1-year anniversary of ChatGPT. That was the person celebrating a 1-year birthday. And I went into ChatGPT today and typed in, "How do you feel about turning 1?" And ChatGPT said, "I cannot answer that question because I have no personal emotions or experiences." But it's amazing. 1 year ago, OpenAI launched ChatGPT, and it's been amazing. People can write poetry, they can write music, but it's also opened up a whole Pandora's box of, is ChatGPT the example of AI gone rogue and whether we're regulating it enough? So
Hold
anyway.
on a second. One quick question that I've got to ask and everything. I do not know the answer, so I will defer to Jacoby. While ChatGPT may be officially launched 1 year ago, I think that in my conversation with people that are in that space, ChatGPT is actually older than a year and all in that space because there have been some things that were in that lane for a number of years.
Went to market.
So,
It went to market, and we might spend tomorrow's show talking about AI. But I want to just give a homework assignment to everyone on the show. I think this is important for us to kind of look at, how is ChatGPT? Are any of us on the show using ChatGPT? If we are
No.
using it, how are we using ChatGPT? That's
don't
an interesting topic of discussion.
It doesn't
And
help
then-
me to make even 50 cents on a good day.
So,
So why
so
would I?
just a real quick thing. One, we are, since we are in this space, we are influencers just like anybody else. Hence the reason why the move towards digital. So being an influencer means that you are influencing people. Influencing people means that you're teaching people. That's what we're actually doing. So when we give an educated opinion, we're influencing ideas and having a great discussion. Therefore, we're teaching people as we discuss. Just as we're talking about ChatGPT, yes, has been around for, AI and bots and all this stuff have been around forever. But ChatGPT, like Steve said, has launched last year, but the acceleration of it and chat
I'm
and
going to give the final comment before I
Jacoby,
leave.
I would like
I
to
was
correct you.
the boss of
Influencing people
ChatGPT
and
got
teaching
fired
people
because he
are
saw
two different
what the
things. Don't replace
the
influencing
ChatGPT boss
people
got fired.
by
Well,
teaching
got
people.
fired because he was or quit
Influencing
because
people
he was
in
afraid
media,
of what he
write
saw and how
something
the
about
evolution of ChatGPT
what's
was.
her name, Taylor
There's a lot of
Swift.
problems.
So where is education there? Influencing is not
Just to point out,
teaching. Okay,
just to point out, Sasha, it is a fact that right now every school in the nation and even schools in the world are utilizing the internet itself and actually utilizing videos to teach kids. Therefore, we are now influencers. What does the word influence mean?
garbage.
Definition. Look it
I've
up.
got to go, guys, but I just want to, and the final thing of how I'm using ChatGPT. So
I am too.
before I go on as a politician, but also someone in media, one way that I've been using it, as long as I fact check it, is in the old days when I would go researching something, whether it was the Israel war, whether it was the rise of artificial intelligence, whether it was Henry Kissinger, I would have to go pull articles, find the links, cut and paste, source it all. And now within a matter of seconds, I can use ChatGPT to actually get my information quickly. Now, I write my own content, but I think it is interesting how it's saved my time. So what used to take me 5 to 6 hours to prepare for a live TV show or radio show, now it takes me in the matter of an hour, hour and a half, sometimes less. And my ratings on the state TV and radio have been astronomically high. I mean, I'm the only person in North Carolina that's now on 2 shows in a show that actually represents 7 million people a week on PBS. Okay. But the ChatGPT has helped me do that. It does come with challenges. Do we quit reading books because we don't need to read? Do we not? Is it hurting our children because you can't detect ChatGPT? And do we want our children to be able to reason and think on their own rather than just going to ChatGPT to do the homework?
Hey,
Three
Steve,
states
before
in
you
United
before you totally end and everything, I was just going to mention one other thing really quickly. I actually sent the email to Nick and Kim and everything, but an individual that I also know uses ChatGPT for some of the things that he does and is one of our show folks, one of those influencers that Jatovi was talking about, is now listed among the top 10 in podcasters in the personal branding space. So Grant McGaw, who does a show every Wednesday, is in the top 10 in personal branding. So I just want to give him a shout out because you can actually look it up.
And I gotta go.
Categories. Personal branding is a category. He falls in the top 10 in the podcasting.
We'll be talking about AI tomorrow. Thank you, Ghost. I'll come in with a prepared show. Have a great day, everybody. Thank you.
See you, Steve.
See.
Yeah.
But yeah, as much as you want to complain that we do not teach on this show or any other show that's online that does not teach, that's factually false.
I learn a lot more by watching The Golden Bachelor, to be honest with you.
You learn more from watching The Golden Bachelor than Modern Investment? I love learning from Sasha.
Yeah, I mean, if I had a choice between watching The Golden Bachelor or watching an educational show on Pod TV, bring me that Golden Bachelor, baby. Bring me the Golden Bachelor or The Voice, Or,
well, I would say that Sasha could be. I would say that Sasha could be a Golden Bachelor. I would say Sasha could be a Golden Bachelor, but he's got a lovely wife, so I'm not trying to divorce him and his wife and everything. So they seem like they have a very good couple and a very good relationship. So I don't think he can be the Golden Bachelor yet. Now, if something happens, that will be another story, or maybe she'll be the Golden Bachelorette. But right now, they seem like a loving couple. So I'm going to keep y'all married for a while and everything.
The good old Golden Bachelor.
Yes.
It's
But on that note, we're going to get out of here. We will be talking politics on World Politics.
Oh.
I know we've got a guest on the 5th that is in the political lane, but none today that I'm aware of other than our usual suspects and all along those lines. And we do the recording at 12. I do know that because the other show is a pre-record, so it can start at exactly 12 o'clock. So the other show is a pre-record, so we'll start at exactly noon, the recording of the chess show that will then air on its regular time on Saturday. But we'll do that recording in less than an hour.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
Hopefully I can learn how.